Hi, welcome to Living from Desire. I'm Jason.
I'm Melody.
Today we are going to talk about finding when we've found connection to our own soul, or we've found connection to something called God, Goddess, or Allah,
The bigger thing.
the bigger thing, and that sort of transition point between being someone who is still seeking and then being someone who's found. And I think the jump off point there, at least for me, is uh, sometimes as bad as I may want other people in my life to have found something for themselves. And it's not necessarily, just like one and done, like, oh, I found desire. I found my soul's purpose. I found God. I found Jesus. It's like we're constant. When the quality of having found is that we're constantly living into it, and the humility of constantly living into a thread that's a life that's uniquely our own, of our true self. And sometimes a lot of, I guess, a lot of seeking can be trying to sort of fix how other people are relating to us, when really they just need to relate to their own path, and I just need to relate to my own path, and then how our paths interact. And or it can be really wanting for another person. um, you might have like uh, sort of supremely out of control people in your sphere, like people with addiction or mental health issues, or uh, sort of like a recurring crises in their life, and that powerless of really not being able to help anyone outside of sort of being a reflection of what's possible for themselves, for them. So I can just be myself to the fullest, and my what I've found with desire and with God and with my own life's path. I can just be the sort of most intimate and expressed version of that. And that is my contribution to someone else who's still seeking. Um, because you don't really, I can think of so many times throughout my life where you just don't know. I just didn't know till I knew. And no matter what someone could communicate to me, tell me, or what they could just repeat to me over and over again, it just wasn't my time then for that particular nugget to land. So let's jump off from that topic.
I think it's interesting that that for you this identity of seeker was more tied to other people. In my life, I mean, I've identified as a seeker up until like a few months ago, and it was a very different quality of like when I was asked, or when I would inquire what's my deepest desire, I've always said it's to know God. God is this externalized force. No matter how many people, you read all the things and everyone says God is within, God is within. But I didn't have that embodiment. And I wanted that. I wanted to feel that, but I just didn't have access to that feeling. And so I did identify as a seeker. I was seeking God. I was seeking, and God was just the word I had for this like emptiness I felt in myself that I wanted to fill. But there's a sense of like knowing that it wasn't anything necessarily in this material reality that could fill it. It was, and I tried, I would sit in these women's circles and we would go around like, what do I desire? And people would say like, I desire a car, I desire a house. I didn't want any of that. I mean, like on one level, sure, it'd be nice to have these things, but I like knew it wasn't the thing, because I would have the thing, and then what? And
I think a hallmark of a mystic, someone with like a mystical purpose, is that I can remember being 12 years old and asking God, or whatever I understood as God at that time, is like, the only thing I want in this life, these are the words I used. The only thing I want in this life is enlightenment. I just want to understand. And that's such an odd request for a 12-year-old, you know?
Mhm.
And like you're saying, like you've always had that penchant for wanting to be so part of this experience that it's like inseparable from you and it. And I've always had that penchant too. And I find that interesting because like my mom, ever since she was 5 years old, she knew she wanted to be a doctor.
Mm.
And so she was always interested in uh, the healing arts from a medical perspective. But I've always been interested in the healing arts um, from a being found perspective of like, what is enlightenment? What is being my true self? What is
Mhm.
merging with God? What is divinity? What is love? And having those experiences, like being that experience, that's what I've always wanted. And I know that my different forays into, we grew up Methodist, so we'd go to this Methodist church every morning, Black Methodist church near downtown Nashville. And you're drinking the grape juice from the little plastic cups, or you're eating the flesh of Christ
The
with
Eucharist.
the bread, yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm in my Sunday best, and my older brother's like stomping on my feet because he's bored in church. And the kids, they're running around, and you're going to Sunday school, and you're like, right. But it was interesting to me because I never liked going to Sunday school. I felt like it was like the cheap way out of what we were doing.
Mm.
Like I always wanted to understand what was in the Bible.
It's such a very similar. So I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, went to church on Saturdays, and I went to Seventh-day Adventist like kindergarten through 8th grade. And I I remember like moments of either being in church or being in worship at school, or what we call chapel. And there's these moments where it's like example that I'm sure many church kids had growing up. My mom got really mad at me one day when I wanted to wear jeans to church. And there was this whole thing like, God doesn't, want you to wear jeans or whatever. And I'm like 7 or something. I'm like, God doesn't give a shit what I wear. Like, what do you mean? Like, there's this like relationship already between me and God. And I'm just there. And then I think especially with my parents, my mom specifically, like seeing these kind of rules she had of how God would accept me. I just remember always being so perplexed by it. And then, especially given that Old Testament Bible and New Testament Old Testament God and New Testament God are like two different personalities. I started kind of just feeling like, I don't know, it kind of feels like people maybe were making things up in how they received God. And I mean, I could say so much more about how this shifted for me. But
I actually have
yeah.
this book. Funny enough, it's sitting right here. It's called How God Changes Your Brain by Andrew Newberg and Robert Waldman. And those two guys are neuroscientists, and they actually look at people's brains based on their belief of what God is. And if it's like an Old Testament God, for example, you have a larger amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, and then you're more likely to support policies like having a larger military or more sort of like nationalistic policies, like closing the border, so forth. And so, like your belief in religion shapes your obviously it shapes your entire life of like what you believe the purpose of this whole thing is. To contrast that, they also have where people have a sort of unity concept of God, where God is like everything and union, and then people have like a smaller amygdala and they have some other part of their brain that's larger, and then they're more likely to support obviously different policies. I find that fascinating because seeking is, I think, something interesting about this particular phrasing of our existence as following desire or the practice of desire is that there's never a completion to it. Is that we're always in this motion of becoming more aware of who we are and what our world is and what we're doing here and what we're contributing here and who we're becoming. And sometimes there can be a sense that there's a finality when you just talk about God as like a standalone entity, like, oh, I found God, and like that's it. Or I found, and then what is your idea of God? And so I find that interesting because then you can get into all these religious battles where it's this interpretation of God versus this interpretation of God, and in some ways, there's still, in my mind, there's still a sense of seeking there where there's a proving that this is right over this. And so, even within the, I guess, different tiers of having found Jesus or God or pick your select entity, it's like there can be still a sense of seeking.
Well, there's two things I want to say. One thing is something I've noticed in people who are on this kind of like more spiritual path or way of living.
But what does that mean, spiritual?
Just a belief in the unseen, or like that there is something greater that's pulsing through us in the world.
And you say that's more spiritual versus?
No, that's not what I was saying.
You're saying compared to
versus I guess versus people who don't necessarily have this curiosity around like the bigger picture or the bigger like
so just kind of taking things at face value, like
this is what it is, this is what I do, this is,
yeah,
I don't know how else to explain.
That's fine, keep going. I was just wanted to clarify that.
So what I've noticed in some, is like that pain of not having that question answered of like, what is God, or what is my purpose, or not having totally like found what you're seeking, so that hole is still there, but you want so desperately to have found the thing that it's easy to then latch onto one particular belief system, whether it's a religion or a specific strand of like new age spirituality, and then decide this is the set of belief systems I will now give myself over to. And it's just, I just think it's interesting. And I say this as someone who at many points along the way, I've wanted so badly to be able to do that, just to be like done with this like the yearning and the longing of like looking for God, to just find some set of belief systems that would settle me enough that I can kind of just like, because that's always been like the underlying thing that's been nagging at me, like always. But so I can see it in people where they still have that, but it's like a collapse into, I don't want to hold that pain anymore. I'm just going to find this one. Now I feel like I belong in this community, and this is the set of beliefs I will not believe. The difference is you can feel it in that person if they're kind of just like spitting at you a set of beliefs that they think that they like memorize mentally, because it's just, there's no like depth to it. So that's one thing I want to say. And then the second is what's the second thing? Oh, the second thing is so I have heavily identified as a seeker for a very long time. Early last year, I was at an event where I shared this part of me for like the trillionth time in my life. And then what I was told is something along the lines of, let's say God came to you and stood in front of you and was like, okay, I'm here. You found me. Then what? And I remember the feeling in my body of kind of just like it almost felt like a slap across the face of like oh. And I sat with that for so long, so long, so long. And it was like exactly what I needed to hear, because it had me realize that part of that seeking identity, it gave my mind something to do. And there was a part of me that wasn't willing, well, I shouldn't say wasn't willing, unconsciously wasn't willing to let the seeker identity go, because then what? Then what am I now if not a seeker? And it just showed me how like seeking the seeker, who I had made like my core self, this and that, was merely just another identity that I was holding on to as something special. And so then it's like, if I found God, if I let myself believe that, then what? And, this took a long time for it to actually feel embodied. And it also involved plant medicine. But then then what became like, oh, then I actually have to just go and do the thing that God, that me, that the internal pull desire is asking me to do. And that's harder than seeking God.
At least at that point.
Well, it still feels like that now, but
Well, say what's harder about it. Is it, I mean, it's more real. It's more that you have to experience more.
There's more risk. It's direct, and it's like it's here. There's more, it's real. It's very, very real. Like, tangible kind of real. And it's like me and my seeking, right? And I love the part of me that was a seeker, because then I wouldn't be at this point. But looking at her, it was not very present, because it was always like seeking. I mean, you're looking out for something else. So it's both kind of very mental and very like elusive, very like wispy,
Never arriving.
Yeah, and it's like kind of just always in that like that longing, but it's, and um then actually following, being like, oh, desire is the way God speaks through my body. Now I have to do it. Then there's like, I mean, my lived life has changed, because it's no longer just living inside my head. So yeah, there's more risk to like this.
Well, it seems like there's more risk, but a lot of like people that I guess work with through the village clinic, I find it interesting because I come from a family of doctors. So, they show up, they go to work at the office, and people come in with physical ailments that then they get pills or they get referred to some sort of therapy to sort of resolve the symptom of that physical discomfort. I show up at the office and it's kind of the same thing. Like, people have symptoms, but for the most part, my solutions can include medical solutions, like go see the doctor. But it also includes this sense that as long as we're disconnected from our soul and our, like, this sense of desire and purpose that's flowing through us, we're going to eternally have symptoms. We're going to eternally be uncomfortable. And I'm looking for that solution. And in my mind, like, the deepest solution of that existence, of like why I exist here, and as long as I'm not in alignment with why I exist here, I'm always going to feel pain, and I'm always going to have symptoms that are guiding me back to that central issue. And so I guess as a mystic or like a soul guide, that is, and my role in the community and my role in the whole is to assist people in connecting that. And the symptoms that they're experiencing are all pointing to a deeper connection there. And I think sometimes, for example, why desire is so choice is that it's not necessarily really about it's about you. It's about your relationship with you. And so really getting into that relationship through desire. For example, yoga, the word means union. And so the purpose of yoga is to find that self union. But if you go to any yoga studio in any city and you're buying that, month class pack, and you're showing up every week and this and that, it loses touch with that simple premise that it's meant to guide you back to your essence. And so we don't talk about yoga as union, but we talk about yoga as kind of like making me fit or making me sexy, or like a stress relief, or whatever it is. But the ultimate stress relief comes through that deepest alignment. And so I've just had to ponder this question quite a bit about, like, what is the purpose of a religious person or a spiritual person, or we're calling it a mystic, but you could call it a priest, you could call it a shaman, you could call it a priestess, you could call it a medicine woman or medicine man, you could call it an erotic artist. What is the purpose? What is our purpose in the community? And I find that really interesting, that at least one answer is that we're here to ourselves have found alignment, or have found alignment and then also assist other people in their alignment with their own soul and their own life's expression. Anything else? We can wrap up now.
I feel that was good.
So you do the closing remarks and shut us down.
I'm not sure what the closing remarks are.
Just try.
So we will not be doing breathwork this week because today's Wednesday. But next week we'll have breathwork. We'll have another guided soul meditation by Jason, and we will be doing we'll be doing at least 2 of these talks next week. And am I missing anything?
No, I think that's good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.